April 28, 1988 Aloha Airlines flight. Number 243 flew to Honolulu. It took off from the international airport. The distance to the plane is less than 1 hour. He had to decide in time for this flight. The day was clear and the plane flew in the usual way without any hassle. Everything took off from the airport. Tired of running but some flying. Completed by a sudden explosion moments later. Some understanding before the plane moved. Address a first-class cabin with a jolt. The roof was torn off and the plane was separated from its head. Passengers and cabins overlooking the open sky above. The crew lost their lives. Did the plane make an emergency landing? To know about the giving accident, stay tuned with us. This Boeing 737-200 series aircraft in 1979. Aloha Airlines was given, so far, $35,000 in total by the aircraft. It was an hour flight to Pori but this aircraft in its service so far. Mostly for short distance travel only. It was used for this reason. The plane flew more than 90,000 times. Had taken off and landed so many of them. Because of the short distance flights, this aircraft, 3 times the limit. Had taken off and landed many times. This plane 3 times on the day of the accident. Had traveled from Honolulu to Hilo. Everything at the airport is normal. And ground safety staff at the airport. Completed external inspection of ship. In their report, the safety staff. Any kind of technology in airlines or no mention of body part malfunction. Some time ago, Splen had his own Boeing service as per scheduled inspection. The bulletin report was passed and this. In the investigation, there is some kind of malfunction in the plane. No mention of. The captain led the flight for 44 years. Who are the robots doing time air? 8,500 flight years of efficient flying experience. Was 36-year-old in flight as co-pilot. First Officer Medal in Tamkeen Sawar the Jinka. Close to flying such Boeing 737 planes. Had 3,300 hours of experience in total. Boeing 737 to both pilots. Even from 10,000 flying hours of the plane. Had more experience. Crusoe in flight with the rest of the crew. That day flight attendant Clarabelle Lansing. All the passengers were also on board. During this time they started boarding the plane. A passenger passing through the boarding bridge. The external fuse of the plane was noticed. Hui falls on the crack, seeing which he slightly. Even nervous goes but thinking that maybe. Airport staff informed about this in advance. Be it a flight crew or an airport. She does not mention it to the staff. Noon after all passengers boarded. The flight rolled off at approximately 1 p.m. Started the process. Flight via taxiway at approximately 1:25. 243 took off from Hilo International Airport. Done. Pilot plane following flight route. To carry the course to the prescribed height. For climb begins as usual denominator. Occurs in flight after takeoff until the plane completes its climb and owns it. Passenger does not reach the prescribed height. It is mandatory to wear a seat belt. So did all the passengers of Flight 243. She was wearing her seat belt. Like a plane slowly increasing its height. It reaches a height of 24,000 feet. Suddenly there is a loud explosion. And with a jerk first-class cabin. Fully. Separates from. Handling the plane after the sudden explosion. When the pilots look back. They lose their senses. Cockpit door and first-class cabin. The roof was torn off and the pilot. The open sky was visible behind him. Of the plane with air throughout the cockpit. Fragments are emerging here and there. Seeing death in front of your eyes. Passenger seats of the first-class cabin. Swing in your seat with the help of the belt. Wind speed of 300 miles per hour. Something was pulling out of the plane. Of the left side of the plane due to compression. A large part is also broken and separated from the plane. Lucky to have the seatbelt sign on. All passengers wear seatbelts. Due to which luckily all happened. Passengers remained glued to their seats. But so much for the cabin crew. Do not pull the panel out of the plane by falling. She was trying to go but the wind. Pressure only pulled out. A second air hostess mission to Honda as well. The air pressure hit the cabin floor. But luckily the air hostess mission. Get yourself out of the plane by getting into the passenger seat. Avoided pulling out. Hardly holding the passenger seat. Air hostess fighting for life and death. The mission is still to keep the passenger calm and safe. It was advised to hold the seat. The same while regaining consciousness in the cockpit. The pilot put on his oxygen mask again from. Start trying to control the plane. But soon they realized that. Many of the plane's controls are spread out. The plane was slowly out of control. 24,000 was going between the perron of the air. At an altitude of 50 feet, the plane would oscillate rapidly. It seems that he gave the cabin at such a height. Due to compression and high speed of the plane. It became difficult for the passenger to breathe. Usually the air in the cabin is decompressed. If necessary, help the passenger to breathe. Oxygen mask out from the cabin roof. They go but here Puri Chathi has risen. There was such a strong wind and lack of oxygen. Because the passenger never dies. Can. The first officer immediately radioed the plane. By setting the emergency frequency. Holiday calls to Honolulu Airport. And the emergency at the nearby Maui Airport. Gives information to land but. Air fault in the cockpit it was so much. The Honolulu ATC controller didn't understand anything. The noise was so high that even the pilot was alone. The other hand did not hear the voice of the other. Pilates speaking in gestures of decision to quickly bring the plane down. Take the nose of the plane without losing any time. By landing, the pilots quickly lower the plane. They start bringing. Pilots put the plane down so fast. 4,100 feet per plane at a time. It starts coming down to the minute speed. Usually 3,000 feet per passenger plane. It comes down to minute speed only so that pilots can control the plane and the plane. Do not crash but all passengers with you. To save from death. Quickly lower the plane near the pilots. There was no other way but to bring Tetsi. When the plane was coming down from 14,000 feet. If it reaches the height luckily. Emergency service at Pilots Mau Airport. Succeeded in contacting the center. And emergency landing information to them. Ambulance and fire at the airport. The brigade is asked to be ready. First class due to lack of oxygen. The passenger in the cabin starts to suffocate. But as the plane altitude of 10,000 feet. The captain starts coming down from the plane. Reduce the speed due to which the passenger. Too little oxygen to breathe. Begins to meet. Captain plane reducing speed. They start to approach the runway but the speed is low. 195 miles per plane while doing so. If the plane reaches the speed of an hour. It starts to get out of control. Pilates soon realizes that. If they save the plane from crashing. If so, increase the speed of the plane. But the plane at such a high speed. Landing was no less than a danger. Usually to make a safe landing. A plane at a speed of 150 miles per hour. Landing has to be done. Better to have a crush than a plane. Land at high speed. Landing Captain First Officer Tompkins. Asked to ear down, after which the first officer immediately takes him down. But to turn down the landing gear knob, even though the front landing air light is green, it does not mean that landing. Seeing that the ear could not be down, the captain landing air in manual lever immediately. Try to down again and again. Landing air light despite trying. Green does not usually occur in such a situation. Also check with the camera installed in the pilot's cockpit. Can the landing gear be down or not? No, but unfortunately that camera also spread. It was done. Now Pilates has a way of knowing this. No front landing gear down. Has it happened or not? The captain doesn't want to waste any more time. And that, if the front decides to land, the landing gear would not have actually gone down. And the plane would have landed at such a speed. It was sure to crash on the runway anyway. In condition, Pilates has another one. There was no choice. And control only due to system malfunction. There was no green light in the panel. And blast him in the air about 13 minutes. A plane hovering 30 feet in the air finally touches the runway. After a short run on the runway, the plane, it stops safely. Emergency services as well as those of the airport. No employee could believe his eyes. How is the cost of the plane correct? May land safely but no one. It is said that no one can kill science. 65 of the resident passengers on board the plane. The passenger gets hurt in this accident. 8 passengers will be seriously injured. Unfortunately, air hostesses are colorable. Dancing dies in this accident. And unfortunately his body was never found. Pi. The plane was so badly damaged. About to repair it. This accident could not be imagined. Terrible and amazing was the blink of an eye in the blink of an eye. The news spread all over the world and immediately. The investigation was started. This is the biggest question facing the investigators. How about a heavy jet airplane? The roof was torn apart in the air and separated from the plane. Usually the exterior of an airplane fuse is large. Part from 2.5 mm pearl metal sheet. It is made in easy to understand language. If you try, this thickness is like this. As much as 2 credit cards to each other. Place on top of 4 meters long and 2 meters wide of metal. The inlets have metal baffles from each other. The aid is therefore usually attached. In such a condition, the edge of the joint is the weakest. There is space and therefore of investigators. The first suspicion is towards these joints area. Goes. After this checks when all the passengers. When questioned, the same passenger who in the wall of the plane while boarding. Crack had seen them about it in. Tells. The place where the passenger talks about the crack. The same goes for the investigators in their investigations. A crack in the plane can be seen from the place. It is so high in the air. Was done. Now the biggest question was that a few days ago. Despite the security check, why? Also the service inspector came in the plane. The crack was not detected and it was exposed. This mistake happened because the plane minimize costs incurred in company investigations. Wanted to reduce, therefore, of federal aviation. According to the rules, only necessary places like checking only the front part of the plane. Everyone else on the plane was mandatory. Whether or not to check joints. It was at the discretion of the airlines. However, this plane 35,496 hours of time on such a sea route. Had spent time flying where the environment. It was full of names and names. Whether to rust any metal. A lot components. Airlines have regular and full of their planes. Didn't think it was necessary to investigate. Such a heavy load occurred during maintenance. Due to human errors. The mistakes found in the investigation are so terrible and it was dangerous that the U.S. government immediately to change the entire maintenance process. Gave instructions. Star Sports was also formed which the main objective is to make all planes well. Had to check during the investigation of this new team. If any fault is found in even one plane, go to all planes of Puri Airline. It could be re-examined. This is very common in the airline industry. But there was a big and important change. Unfortunately, air hostess Colorable Lansing. He had to pay the price with his life. In this accident, the pilot as well as the entire cabin. The crew team very bravely lowered their lows. For which many of them were carried out. Also honored with Bahadur Puraskaran. Gone. So please click the like and subscribe button. Please encourage us with your support. We are forever grateful to you.